Hey guys, Toast here. Today I want to talk about Ubisoft's new Tom Clancy game, Ghost Recon Wildlands. A beta of the game was available a while back, but obviously there were some issues with the beta, and the true scope of the game couldn't really be discerned. Now that the full game has been released, I want to talk a bit about some of the things that Ghost Recon Wildlands does particularly well, but then also some of the points where it needs improvements, in the hopes that the information may help you make a more informed purchasing decision should you be contemplating the game. Let me state that I have not yet finished the game in its entirety, so this is my experience after having put about 10 or so hours into it. A quick introduction to the game in case you may be unfamiliar with it. Ghost Recon Wildlands is an open-world third-person and first-person tactical shooter. The game is set in very near-future Bolivia, and the plot focuses on a Mexican drug cartel that's gained power and influence in the surrounding area, and has turned Bolivia into essentially a narco state. The US dispatches their Spec Ops unit called Ghost, whose goal is to dismantle the cartel and help restore Bolivia to its pre-narco state. In the background of this video, you'll mostly see uncut co-op gameplay so that you can get a feel for the actual gameplay itself. Now let's begin with the things that the game does particularly well. One of the challenges with open-world co-op games is creating both a story and a world in which everything can be done in co-op that can be done in single-player without losing out on part of the experience. This is something that games like Far Cry and Saints Row have struggled with over the years, and thankfully it's something that Ghost Recon Wildlands does particularly well. All aspects of the single-player game work exceptionally well in co-op, and there's nothing in the world that's locked off and nothing in the story or campaign that's unavailable to do in co-op or can only be done in single-player, at least not in the time I've put into the game so far. This gives you the freedom to do everything as you please and not have to worry about missing out on a particular experience just because you'd like to play with a friend. Not to mention the fact that most of the content I've played so far has been extremely well suited to co-op play, giving you the option to approach most situations in different ways depending on how many players you're playing with, be it stealthy infiltration, or going in guns blazing, or even just a mix of the two. Often more enjoyable than the content that's provided in the actual game is the emergent gameplay that arises when unexpected things happen in the game in co-op mode. It happens frequently in Ghost Recon Wildlands that plans go awry and you end up with fits of laughter at the outcome. An example that I've experienced that unfortunately I don't have recorded was a medical cargo drop on top of a mountain that, thanks to an unexpected anti-aircraft missile that we have very narrowly dodged, and that could have easily been avoided by simply not flying over the heavily armored base that we flew over, ended up with me and Indigo Gaming having crashed into the side of a mountain, leaving us with a perfectly landed plane with one wing, no propeller, and a few good laughs. Moments like this happen often and really make the game more enjoyable when you play with people who have a good sense of humor. While Ghost Recon Wildlands doesn't give you quite as much customization as something like the Elder Scrolls games or Grand Theft Auto, it does do a pretty decent job of ensuring that you can make your character look more or less the way you want him to within the scope of the world in which the game takes place. The initial customization options offer you the ability to amend the physical looks of your character with a handful of pre-made faces, hairstyles, and facial hair, and then you have a respectable amount of clothing styles to choose from for each piece of clothing, as well as multiple colors and camo options for each piece as well. Each gun that you have can have its camo customized from a decent-sized list of pre-made camos. Again, while Wildlands is not comparable to games that offer very intense customization, for a game like this it offers enough to keep most players satisfied. You also have skill customization that you can upgrade with earned skill points and found resources in-game that allow you to specialize your character more to your playstyle. I'm of the mindset that the level of success and enjoyment a game receives is due almost entirely to the game's mechanics and gameplay. However, having a nice looking piece of eye candy certainly doesn't hurt. To that end, Ubisoft has done a really good job of making Ghost Recon Wildlands a beautiful game to look at. Given the scope of the game, which is massive, and the huge expanses of mountain ranges and valleys that you'll see in the distance at pretty much all times, you may think that high quality textures and models would take a back seat, but that isn't the case. On ultra settings, honestly even on high settings, the game looks really nice. Larger scale aesthetics like the sunset over a mountain with smoke rising from a recently raised cocaine lab, to very small scale details like weapon skins and building textures, give the game a really nice visual fidelity. From the overarching art design down to the small texture details, the game does a really great job of giving you something pleasant to look at while you're on your missions. Now unfortunately, all of the beauty and eye candy comes at a cost. While I can't necessarily speak for the PlayStation 4 or Xbox One version, the PC version suffers from some pretty poor optimization. From significant inconsistencies in frame rate based on what you're looking at, and we're talking dips of almost 30 frames per second at times, to hitching every few minutes for seemingly no reason, the game isn't as smooth from a technical standpoint as one would hope for a AAA release. On high settings, which is 2 steps lower than Ultra, even with an overclocked i7-5820K and a GTX 980 Ti SC Plus edition, I was only able to run the game at around 75 frames per second on average, but with dips into the low 50s at times and the aforementioned hitching once every couple minutes or so. My friend who I was playing with encountered similar results with the same GPU architecture and a better CPU. You'll likely see some of the hitching in the background footage, which is hitching in the game itself, not from rendering or compressing the video. If you're interested in the game on console, obviously this wouldn't be a huge factor for you, but if you're considering it on PC, it's something to take into consideration. For a game the size and scope of Ghost Recon Wildlands, you'd expect a wide variety of things to do in order to keep the game world fresh and interesting. Unfortunately, that isn't the case in my experience so far. While the emergent gameplay that I mentioned earlier helps to keep everything interesting, and there's certainly some missions that give you something interesting to do, the majority of the story missions and side missions that you go on and the gameplay that you encounter tends to be a lot of go here, kill these baddies, interrogate a leader, or take a vehicle and deliver it to XYZ location. The missions are fairly cookie cutter so far, and granted you gain the more specialized skills from the skill tree that allows you to approach the missions in a slightly different way, the ultimate goal and basis for each mission is pretty mundane. My hope is that things will get more varied as I progress further into the game, however as it stands I'm not particularly impressed with the variety that the game offers. While the on-foot gameplay mechanics are pretty sound and well crafted, the vehicle mechanics leave something to be desired. Ground and air vehicles are both challenging to control with a mouse and keyboard, necessitating a controller to be plugged in and nearby in order to have improved handling. Helicopters, for example, move forward at a very slow rate unless the acceleration is also applied. However, applying acceleration and moving forward at the same time also forces the helicopter to descend while moving forward, making simply trying to get to your destination an exercise in flying forward, halting your forward movement to gain more altitude, moving forward again, and then rinsing and repeating. Ground vehicles handle a little bit better, though the physics on them can be pretty inconsistent at times, especially when trying to drive over rocks or mountains. If it weren't for the fact that the vehicles were so necessary to get around the world of Wildlands, it wouldn't be as big of a problem. Now with all that mentioned, it's of course up to you if you think the game is going to be worth the asking price. For me personally, I've gotten enough enjoyment out of it so far and will likely continue to play it for some time, so I'm happy with the purchase. The game is far from perfect, but there's enough moments of enjoyment and laughter that emerge that keep me coming back. That said, this is not a game I'd recommend getting if you plan to play solo, as most of the interesting moments in the game come from co-op experiences, and while the game isn't necessarily bad solo, it doesn't hold up nearly as well without someone else to join you. For those of you who've played Ghost Recon Wildlands, how do you feel about the game? Have you enjoyed it so far? Let me know in the comments. If you liked the video, please leave a like, and if you want to see more content, please subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, this is Toast, and I'll talk to you soon.